Hey baddies, it's your girl Dom
and Audra,
and we're going over Nehemiah chapter 4, the enemy opposes the rebuilding. Isn't that funny how in chapter 3 we talked about building up our walls and what that looks like, and now we're talking about how the enemy can come and attack those walls.
Yeah.
So we're truly doing the inverse of Nehemiah 3 episode.
It makes me think too, like after you saying that, just God is the ultimate creator and the enemy has come to destroy the ultimate creation. And so like us building a wall, he's always going to be around the corner of everything we're building for good because we're doing it with God, right? So it's ultimately God's creation.
Right? Yeah. Like them building the wall, that's beautiful. Them building the wall is God building the wall. Because he's working through this community right now.
Right.
That is such a good point. We got Sanballat. And he's pissed. He flew into rage and mocked the Jews. And so he's just kind of going at Nehemiah and the people building up the wall right now. And I always point out, I underlined all the key words that could be correlated to the enemy. So within chapter 4, it says that he flew into a rage, mocking the Jews. So if someone's mocking somebody else, probably from the enemy. Down to verse 8, it says, throw us into confusion. So if it's confusing coming from the enemy. In verse 11, it talks about we will swoop down on them and kill them and end their work. Like John 10:10, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. It also says in verse 12, they will come from all directions and attack us. Moral of my point is there's a bunch of key words in chapter 4 that can kind of describe the enemy, can describe Satan's tactics. I feel like there's no new tricks with Satan. And so if we can truly learn how he can attack us by diving into chapter 4, I think that we can kind of spiritually be ready for those attacks and be ready to defend ourselves.
That's good. I'm writing it down.
Really?
Yeah, I'm like, preach.
Quite a few people that are opposing the rebuilding of the wall. Okay, so in verse 2, they're mocking Nehemiah, and it says, what does this bunch of poor, feeble Jews think they're doing? Do they think they can build up the wall in a single day just by offering a few sacrifices? Do they actually think they can make something of stones from a rubbish heap, and charred ones at that? For context, to keep it in mind, the Jews are currently building this wall, and I think there's a lot of enthusiasm and excitement to building something. But when you build something, you're going to have piles of rubbish in what you're building. So there's probably piles of broken bricks and stones and whatever was kind of cementing this wall. There's rubbish. And so I think it's just really key that, yes, it's exciting to build something, but along the way, you have to take out the trash, right? You have to get rid of that rubbish. And I feel like that could be a very discouraging task at hand. The enemy is basically coming at them saying, hey, you're going to get rid of all this rubbish. And there's such importance in that because in life, we're going to have to get rid of the trash.
Truly.
Within
Within ourselves
lives.
and around us.
Right. We talked about the metaphorical wall. Well, if something's not fruitful, if that brick is rotten, if it's causing a chain reaction of broken bricks within your wall, you have to get rid of that and you have to take the trash out. And it is not just as a simple task. It is discouraging. Not many people are up for that challenge.
Yeah, I mean, that makes me just think of discernment and kind of being aware of who you're letting in because there's cracks in our walls and the enemy can get in and he uses good people to break us down. Maybe those people don't know. Maybe they do. Who knows? I'm not sure. But I just think that the enemy knows us not just as well as God, but he knows what we give him, the words that come out of our mouth, the actions that we take. He's watching us. He's aware of who we are and the way that we're moving. And one small hiccup, and he's right there. If you have one small crack in your wall, he's right there. And so are you going to let your whole world be discouraged because you had to take out this trash that fell? Or are you going to say, okay, this happened. Now let me get back up. Let me pick better. Let me choose wiser and rebuild this portion that crumbled right in front of me, you know, because there's two options we can take. We can sit and like let the whole thing crumble or pick it up, dust it off and keep going, you know?
Exactly. We really have to clear out the old so we can build on the new clear foundation, the clear path, the clear plans God has for us and for the community and Jerusalem right now,
Yeah.
right? They know what is to be built.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that, they have to get rid of this trash.
Right.
And it just reminds me of last season, our first Tuesday treasure, Emily. A lot of her testimony was just talking about new age stuff, the occult, psychics, mediums, crystals. Recently, she texted us and was like, hey, got rid of the crystals.
Yeah.
And we're like, woo! Crystals are a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, however, what you do with that and what that meant to you that was in her wall was not fruitful and it wasn't good. And she knew she had to take out the trash.
Yeah.
She knew she had to get rid of them. And it is discouraging. Why? Why did it probably take her so long to get there? Because they're beautiful. They're pretty. They're expensive. It's hard to get rid of things that you had such an attachment to that were once a part of your wall. It's very hard. And so in that, it's just reminding us that at the end of the day, we will always be victorious if we see this and we know, okay, discernment, what is in my wall? What is the rubbish that I need to take out and get rid of? Even though it may be really hard.
Yeah.
It could be a friendship in your wall. It could be a relationship in your wall that truly just wasn't fruitful. It was tearing you apart. And so it can be so discouraging at times. You have a lot of history with that person. You have a lot of love for that person. I truly feel like in this metaphor of the wall, getting rid of the rubbish is probably the hard part.
Yeah.
Because the fun, enthusiastic part is building that new wall.
Right.
You're so faithful and hopeful for this beautiful thing, but getting rid of the old to try to come up with the new is hard.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's such a testament to simply just devoting your life to Christianity and to God. I know that whenever I chose God and welcomed him into my heart, I had a lot of trash. It's almost like when you just let everything pile up and you look at it and it becomes overwhelming because it's like, how do I get rid of all this right now? Like I need to be perfect and clean and I need to just get rid of it. And it becomes overwhelming and you kind of shut down and you're like, oh, I'm just never going to be perfect. So forget it. I'm just going to leave the trash, you know? And the way that I kind of have learned to understand this is that if you have a lot built up, God understands and he has so much grace. And just start with one room, start with one area of your life, you know, and clean that up. I mean, I know for me, it was so many different things. Like at the beginning, I really tried to go hard and then I got kind of burnt out. And even when I look back now, I'm like, man, I called myself Christian in this time and I was still kind of being reckless, you know, like I was not making the right choices. I was not living like truly as I define a Christian should. And it just to me is like, okay, I hadn't gotten to that trash yet. It was still something that I was holding on to that was still validating me here. I needed to keep it. And now it's like I finally have let go of that. And I just see even more of a shift in who I am. Not perfect, right? But like just the way I carry myself, the way I dress, the way I speak. It wouldn't have happened if I would have been like constantly holding on to the worldly validation,
right?
These things. It's like, no, like I can't let this go. This is what everybody does. This is who everybody is. Like I want to fit in. I want to do this. I want to be cool. All this stuff. So
I think too, it's recognizing old patterns. For me personally, I've probably had 21 walls at this point, but in the walls, I would build the same structure and God's wipe out. I'd build it again, same structure, wipe it out. Again, trying again, same patterns in my life, same behavior, same environment, same friends. I'm just layering the same bricks and it's just not working. And God keeps crushing me and he's bringing me down to the foundation. What is going on? What is happening, God? And it's like, no, Dom, correct it. These bricks aren't being fruitful to you. You need to take out the trash, the rubbish. This will not work. And so it's truly having that inner reflection in life. Okay, what is it, God? How do I change my thought process on this? How do I change my behavior and my quick to anger, quick to speak? How do I be better? How do I train myself and build up that wall that you have for me at the end of the day? And it's really hard.
yeah,
It is much easier said than done. And I still think my walls are being built up. And also a lot of it is being teared out at the same time. Just knowing, I don't know, just discernment on it.
yeah. And God's working.
And God's constantly working on you and who's surrounding you and the people he brings to you and the experiences he brings to you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that ties into kind of another point in the area that we're talking about in this chapter of these two men are kind of discussing and they're like, what are they going to do? Like sacrifice there? Or are they planning to finish in a day? Like, do they want to try to like overpower us kind of thing? And these men are giving the Jews kind of this worldly validation of this wall. Like they're thinking of it in a way that they would, right? Like their pride. And so they're projecting that onto the Jews when in reality, this wall is being built by God through the Jews. And so when you're talking, it makes me think of to kind of flip that narrative of our lives and the walls that we have built. But ultimately, God is creating something through us. And if we do put a brick down incorrectly, God can and God has wiped those out, you know, and we'll sit there and we'll be like, what the heck, God? Maybe before Christ came into our lives, or my life anyway, I'm speaking for myself, but I don't remember so many times I would be like, gosh, every time I think I'm getting ahead, I fall right back down, you know? And I just think that I wasn't helping God build the wall he wanted in my life. I was building my wall. And so every single time I laid down a brick, God was like, that's not what I have planned for you. And he'd throw it out from under me. And I'd be like, but I was just like so close, you know, like I was so close to getting to where I thought I wanted to be. And now I'm at square one. And then it would make me mad. It would make me mad at God because I'd be like, who is this God you're speaking of? If he can keep letting me down, you know, but in reality, I'm not praying to him. I'm not looking to him for guidance at all. But if something went right, I'd be like, okay, I guess God likes me today, you know, or whatever. But the minute something broke, then I immediately blamed God. It was all his fault. He hated me. He didn't love me. And that's not true, you know? And I think that goes to a point that you and I were discussing, and I think you can speak to it better, but how the enemy is just everywhere in that. How God can use, you had said it better, he can allow the enemy to do these things.
Yeah, God will allow the enemy to kind of talk smack, right? To give you discouragement, because a lot of times in a lot of personalities, it's actually fuel for the fire. They're more on fire for God. They're more on fire now to build that wall, to make sure they're not vulnerable to outsiders. They're more on fire and more dependent on God through this. And so sometimes we think, oh, why is God allowing this person to come over here and talk so badly about me or talk so badly about my community right now? And in reality, God's like, I allowed that because that's going to put you on fire to do a podcast, or that's going to put you on fire to complete this wall. I know I have it in you, and you're going to have complete dependence on me, and you're going to come to me. And that's kind of what Nehemiah did. When they were coming after him, they were talking all this crap. And in reality, if that was me, I would have talked crap back. I would have been like, let's go, right? Yeah. But his response was prayer. It just goes to show that Nehemiah is reliant on God. His response wasn't to fight him. It wasn't to verbally attack him. It was to go to God in prayer about the situation. And that's exactly what God wants. Yeah. When the enemy comes in and the enemy is talking crap, bringing in confusion, bringing in chaos, is angry, is rageful, and you go to pray and you don't give in to the enemy, imagine the beauty and the fruits of the Spirit that are going to come from that. Just knowing to train yourself that you can go and pray. Basically pray it away. Pray him away. Pray out the enemy. Get out of here, sir.
You're not welcome.
Yeah. When you were talking about the walls and how, you know, there's bad bricks and there's crumbles, I love how verse 7 says the gaps in the wall of Jerusalem were being repaired and they were furious. And so when we truly go to God and ask him to fix us, God, use me as a vessel, internally make me great, help me build my walls for you, help me be a servant to your kingdom, the enemy gets furious. Yeah. Because that is the last thing the enemy wants, is for you to fill those gaps in your wall, for you to complete the mission of building this wall. That is the last thing they want. And so he gets mad. I always think it's funny, and that's just where my mind goes of good to bad. Sometimes like a lot of these words in this chapter, it says was furious. And I'm like, what a beautiful word in this situation. There's another one that said fight. And it was such a beautiful word in this chapter. They have such bad connotations, but truly sometimes in the Bible, I'm like, this is the most beautiful word because that's what's happening to the enemy. He's furious. We're fighting back against it. We're using discernment against it. Not necessarily a bad connotation to it anymore.
Right. Yeah. That reminds me of a sermon that I heard probably 2 years ago, honestly, but it's always stuck with me and it's always been something that I kind of keep in the back of my mind. The pastor was talking about the word dangerous and how dangerous gets this negative connotation, right? Like dangerous, you should be scared of it. Don't approach it. it could harm you, all these things. And we as humans and as believers kind of look at the enemy and think, you're dangerous. You could do something to my life that could wreck it. You know, like if I slip up in the slightest bit and you're right there, you could completely take over, whatever, you know? But he kind of flipped the narrative and he was like, what if we're dangerous? What if we're so dangerous that the enemy fears us? And that's why. And if you think about characteristics in who we are, a lot of times we get scared because of the danger. This could be such a good thing. Like you're scared of applying to the job that's far away from your family because what if you actually do get it? Then you have to leave your family, even though it's the dream job that you've always wanted and all this stuff. To an extent, the enemy kind of looks at us with that kind of envy. You're who I always wanted to be. Like I wanted to have the relationship with God that you do, and I ruined it. I gave it all up and I did it because of my own ego and all this stuff. And so what if we're really the dangerous ones to the enemy? And if we could all just kind of come together, we can overpower him and we will. That's a promise from God and all these things. But I don't know. I just really loved that sermon. Walk into a space and be dangerous where the enemy leaves it. Be so in love with God that whenever you enter a space full of new or non-believers, the enemy flees because he's like, crap, this amount of light, I cannot even combat that. I want to walk into a room and be dangerous. I want the enemy to flee when I walk in that space, you know? And it's just encouraging. That's who we're trying to be, you know? And
make the enemy furious by your works.
Make him mad. Good. I'm glad I made you mad. I think that's almost like the only kind of real righteousness we can feel here. Because to our brothers and sisters in Christ, we're no better, you know? But like God has said we are better than this enemy. When we can do something that can combat his hatred for us, it's like, try me again. Even though I've said that and I fully felt the wrath of him, like I will never say that again. But it does kind of hype you up because you're like, I dare you.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying that really.
Yeah. It's just like our baptism stories. We get baptized and the enemy gets so furious because the months after are just hell. Yeah. We're so oppressed. He's in our corner. He's mad. Yeah. We just enraged him because he knows the kingdom we're about to build now. Right. He knows the wall we're about to put up and that he knows in the future he cannot hang with us anymore.
Right.
Out of here.
Bye. See ya. You don't get an invite anymore.
You don't get an invite. Man.
Also, too, to back up to 6 a little bit, it says that when they were building, people had a mind to work. And this, for me, just felt super convicting because I love my job. I love what I do. But when Dom and I are sitting here behind these microphones, when I'm at our small group and stuff like that, like I really just feel my heart is just where it's meant to be kind of thing. I think there's a lot of people that feel like that. They go to work and work is kind of a drag and it's just their day-to-day 9 to 5, whatever. But then they have a passion outside and they question like, what am I supposed to be doing with my life? This is where I feel the most joy. This is where I'm happy. Why am I going there? And God always from the very beginning said we would work. We would mend our fields. We would build onto God's creation. We are working. We are meant to work. They had a mind to work. I think is so important because building a wall back in the day, they had no tools, not like the way we have now. There are no cranes, like nothing. They're truly building this by hand. Waking up every single day, like giving up their actual job to come do this tiring work. If you asked me today, I'd be like, do I got to do that? Like, I mean, truly. And the fact that they are truly just like, they have an honor to do this. You know, it's honorable to God. So that's the same way that I feel like we have to look at our jobs is yes, I'm truthfully blessed to have a job that pays my bills. And then I get to come here after my job and I get to do something that fills me up more than my job, you know? And like, what a blessing because some people don't have that. Some people just have their job that they hate and then they come home and they hate life more. I have a job that I really do love. And then I get to go do something I really, really love more, you know? And that's such a blessing. And so it's such a mind shift of Audra, go to work and be joyous. Go sit in that space and do what the Lord is using you for. Are there believers in that space? No, then make believers, make disciples, right? If there are, great. Talk about God while you're doing this. Hey, I do interior design. And so I get so much joy out of creating a home for people. And not because like, I think it's fun and pretty and all the things. Like I truly love watching my client open their kitchen drawer with their forks and like watching them envision picking up their fork and eating at the dinner table with their family that I've created the space for. It's beautiful, you know? And sometimes I get so burnt out by it. I'm like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to pick out their stupid silverware separator, you know, or whatever it's called. I get mad, but then I'm like, why am I getting mad? Like, I should be rejoicing in this job as they did, you know?
This is life-changing for me. Every morning when I wake up, I always ask God for two things: motivate me today at work and motivate me to work out, because I personally know how easy it is for me to get discouraged to do those things, because I am someone who always went into work with a really poor mindset. Another case, another this, another that. Got to look at numbers all day. Got to go save this Excel spreadsheet, all this boring stuff, right? But no, God, motivate me. Give me that enthusiasm for my job today. And then I'm always like, help me work out, because after work, I'm exhausted and the last thing I want to do is go for a run or do some pull-ups or whatever. So truly the power of prayer. And to that too, before it even talks about in verse 6, it talks about Nehemiah praying. I think it's so fascinating. So Nehemiah said, "Then I prayed, hear us, our God, for we are being mocked. May their scoffing fall back on their own heads, and may they themselves become captives in a foreign land. Do not ignore their guilt. Do not blot out their sins, for they have provoked you to anger here in front of the builders." Nehemiah prayed to God basically to be like, hey, can you hold them captive in a foreign land? In chapter 4, that doesn't happen. But what does God do? He uses his people to have that mindset to work, to motivate them to continue his mission.
Yeah.
Even though the enemy's attacking him. And hey, God, it'd be really nice if I could just, if you could just make them captive in a foreign land, please, like just get rid of them. Or it's a coworker you don't like. Hey, God, please, maybe they find another amazing job. Please get out of here. Please, Lord, like get them out, hold them captive, give them another job. And in reality, that prayer may not get answered. He might answer it in other ways. He might change your mindset so you work harder, so you do better, you continue the work of his kingdom. Yeah. And so that's the beauty of God and prayers. It's just so cool.
Grab your tissues, everyone.
Bring your tissues. Talking about the enemy's tactics in verse 8, it says, they all made plans to come and fight against Jerusalem and throw us into confusion. And I always highlight the word confusion because the enemy is so good at confusing you. Truly, confusion is distraction. We're no longer focusing on God's promises for us and the works that we have in front of us for God, because now we're confused, we're distracted, our minds are wandering elsewhere. We're wondering if we can finish this wall. We're wondering if we can actually get to that point with God. We're starting to question things. The doubt starts to seep in. The enemy's really good at that.
Yeah.
And so just knowing to have that clear mindset. When I think of confusion, I think of dating.
Me too.
And
it's rough out here, y'all.
It is so rough because when you date someone, let's say you have an amazing date, they may not even say, hey, I want to see you again. Or they're like, yeah, it was amazing. And then you just don't hear from them. And you're confused. You're left with confusion. You start questioning. You start doubting yourself. Where did I go wrong? What did I say? Who am I supposed to be? Oh my gosh, did he not like me? What, am I too fat? Am I too ugly? Am I not enough? That doubt starts to seep in, which is, doubt is almost the opposite of faith. You start to question your ability. This is dating advice now, but anyone who puts you in confusion is not for you. And that's not who God has put in front of you to add that brick to your wall. That is not from God. Maybe there's a learning lesson, so he allowed you to go on that date. Maybe he allowed it so you can better understand and have better discernment in the future. But anything that has confusion tethered to it, run.
Yeah. Pay attention.
Yeah.
I mean, on that note too, not dating, but just people in general. In my notes for verse 8, I just wrote, be watchful and observe. While community is a great thing, it can also be used for destruction. These people were angry that the city and / walls were being rebuilt. They came together to fight and cause confusion. Be mindful of the type of community you surround yourself with. I think you have to be cautious of people's motives and 100%. Be aware. And there are friends that are going to come into your life to challenge you for good. But I think that there are also going to be challenges from the enemy. And we have to have discernment to know the difference. Is this a God challenge or is this a worldly challenge? And knowing when to push and lean into those challenges and when to pull back. That's just something I was thinking about in that.
And to that point, even in verse 9, it goes on to say, but we prayed to our God and guarded the city day and night to protect ourselves. And so just being guarded in life.
Mm-hmm.
Always praying. First of all, first tactic, pray about it. Second, be guarded.
Yeah.
Because there are people that are going to be coming here to oppose you, to oppose the wall you're building, the kingdom you're building for God, the people that you're surrounding yourself with. You never know, but always be guarded. Always use discernment, because at the end of the day, we are protecting ourselves.
Yeah.
And we're protecting ourselves from outsiders. I'm going back to dating. But if you bring a guy in your inner walls and you truly let him in, you let him in your home, you cook him a dinner, and then you're left confused, what does that do to you in your home? What does that do to you personally?
Yeah.
It's not fruitful. It's causing chaos.
And that's why us ladies are not doing wifey things for men that have not put a rock on our finger. Say it with me. Because they will take.
I think it's cool, diving down to verse 10, it says, then the people of Judah began to complain. The workers are getting tired and there is so much rubble to be moved. We will never be able to build the wall by ourselves. And so it just goes to show, when the enemy attacks, there may be people in your community that it does discourage some people. Mm-hmm. They're like, man, I got all this rubble to take out. This is a lot of trash. This is a lot of work. We may not be able to do it ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so it's always keeping in mind that the enemy coming in and the discouragement that he brings can work. Mm-hmm. And so in that, it just goes to show that's what can happen.
Well, I mean, I think it's just, I don't know. I don't have like a specific example, but I know that the two of us, like we talk about everything. So it's like, how many times have I come to you and said, I'm not going to do this anymore? Mm-hmm. And I do it. I fall short, right? Or like whatever. And I think that kind of speaks to this a little bit of feeling discouraged, like, or I can't do this, you know? And that's when it takes a good community to look at that person that feels like they can't and tell them not because of their own strength that they can, but because they have Christ and they can. We were building this wall tomorrow and we were so pumped. And then like by day 5, you're like, I can't do this anymore. It is then my job to look at you and say, get up.
Yes.
Kick you and get up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, literally though.
But it is.
It is.
And it's your job to like, if you see somebody like pursuing Christ, and like we've said, like Christianity is hard. Pursuing God is hard. When you see those people that are like, I'm all on fire for the Lord. And then they start taking out the trash and they're like, I can't do this anymore. You know,
right.
It is our job as their community to say, here, I got a trash bag. Let me help you.
Let's go.
You know, let's figure it out. Where do you need to start? Hey, this is overwhelming. Let's just start with the entryway. You know, you don't have to do it all at once.
Right.
It's not like that. And God has grace. So for these people that are like, oh my gosh, I can't build this wall. It was their community to say, okay, sit down, have some water, take a break, but we're going to get back up and we're going to keep going.
Yeah. And that's literally exactly what Nehemiah did.
Yeah.
He literally looked over the situation, called together the nobles and the rest of the people. So he basically got his counsel. This is why I think he's such a great leader. He wasn't just a dictator in the situation, was like, not good. You're going to keep working. He called on his counsel. He called the nobles, he called the rest of them, and he said, don't be afraid of the enemy. Remember the Lord who is great and glorious, and fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. And I underline fight because it's a beautiful thing. Mm-hmm. When the enemy comes, it's not for us to be passive. It's not for us to just allow him in and be discouraged because God blocked you. We're supposed to fight that fight. Mm-hmm. We are supposed to fight the good fight. We are called to do that as Christians. We're not called to be passive when the enemy comes creeping in. We're called to correct it. We're called to build people up. We're called to use discernment and know what is what. And it's very important too that you're not the only one calling shots, that you bring counsel in. You bring people that know and love the Lord and have a great relationship with them. It is so important to do just that. But the last thing we need to do as Christians is be passive when the enemy comes in and just be like, yeah, okay. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's what you believe? Oh, it's my truth? Oh, it's this? No.
Right.
This is God's truth. This is the way. Here's the Bible. Mm-hmm. We need to fight the good fight now.
Right. Right. And I love that verse so much too, because I love that it says, do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord. And I think you could it's like a mic drop there. How many times do you catch yourself being fearful Are you remembering God in those moments? Are you stopping and thinking of him and his powerfulness? And you have given God your yes. God has infinite grace for you. And he is saying, son, daughter, I love you. Infinite grace is amazing, but at the same time, you have to want to in your heart correct yourself. It's not this grace that's like, oh, keep gossiping or whatever, and tomorrow do it again and you still have grace. Like, yes, but no. And I just think like, remember God in that. And when you are remembering God in your shortcomings, God will meet you there and he corrects them. Like I said, I'm no saint. I'm not perfect at all, but I can sit here and say I've never one time prayed to clean up my mouth. I used to cuss all the time. The F-bomb was coming out of my mouth every day, multiple times a day. And in my refinement with Christ, I don't do that. And when I do, I notice it and I feel it in my soul. I'm like, oh my gosh, I just let a cuss word come out. And it's not because I'm a prude or stuck up now or all these things that you would deem somebody like that. It's because the Lord is within me and he's refining me in places I didn't know need refined. And now there's a conviction there, which I am so happy for. It's hard, right? I hate feeling that conviction. I'm like, I used to do this all the time and like say it freely, but remember the Lord. And even in as simple as when I speak and I mess up, I remember God in that. And I'm immediately like, oh God, I know I messed up. Gosh, it doesn't have to be this damning thing. I'm not cussing to say it. I know it's just like, you know,
right.
You know, I feel like kind of powerful. Like I feel like a 5-year-old who gets to say it and like get away with it. But it's not. And he knows your heart.
When I say fight the good fight and don't be passive, I think a lot of times if you don't correct that behavior or you're passive about it, I also feel like that takes a piece out of your wall, because then you're going to look back and be like, man, I knew I should have said something. Man, I should have helped out my community. Man, kind of takes a chunk out of your wall that you've been building. When you do let him in, when it does seep in, when you don't fight the good fight.
Right.
Granted, everything going on in the world with the hurricanes in my hometown of Hudson, Florida, and just Florida in general, I will always have a soft spot for that state. But just hearing the stories and looking on Facebook posts of just the community truly building each other up. Hey, we have a bunch of food over here. Hey, can I bring you water? Hey, can I pick you up on a boat because your house is flooded? Hey, can I buy you new furniture? I just think in such chaos of the hurricane, and it's such a bad thing, and there's so much beauty in it. And it's just watching people, neighbors that maybe haven't spoken in years, come together, help board each other's houses up. There's just so much power in the works of God in the community in which can be done. So when the enemy tries to come in and take that all away, it's truly just knowing that you're frustrating him when you're working together and you're doing God's work.
100%.
In verse 15, when our enemies heard that we knew of their plans and that God had frustrated them, we all returned to our work on the wall. The enemy tried to come in and stop it and do confusion and distractions and all the trickery in his book, but they just kept working. They just kept working alongside each other. It's just the most beautiful thing.
In verse, I guess I'll read 15 and 16 for context, but when our enemies heard that it was known to us and that God had frustrated their plan, we will return to the wall, each to his work. 16, from that day on, half of my servants worked on construction, and half held the spear, shield, bow, and coats of mail, and the leaders stood behind the whole house of Judah. And I just wrote, it's interesting how one hand is working while the other hand is on guard. And I think that is kind of like an underlined almost tip from God, right? Keep one hand in, keep creating, keep doing what I've called you to do, but keep the other hand ready. Keep the other hand on guard. You know that thing where you put your fingers together and you try to make your fingers go the opposite way?
The Chinese.
Yeah, like
prison.
No, not the Chinese
finger
prison.
link.
No, it's like, or like rubbing your tummy and patting your head at the same time. It's very challenging if you think about it to have one eye on your duty to Christ and have the other eye on guard, being aware of your surroundings, being aware of who you're letting in your space. I mean, even think about the small group, right? We want to be welcoming. We're doing the Lord's work. We're trying to be shepherds and bring women in. But at the same time, when you're shepherding all these people, you have to be aware of the people that the enemy is sending to that space too,
Mm-hmm.
and be on guard. And so while you're working and while you're pouring into these women and encouraging them to live their best life, like there might be somebody in that space that's trying to do the exact opposite. You know, like it is kind of a scary thing when you think about it. Like we're sitting in a space and we're sharing our deepest secrets almost,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we're sharing our testimonies, we're asking for prayer. And that's a very vulnerable space, because I could be giving my prayer to somebody and they can go home and pray the opposite of it.
Mm-hmm.
They know exactly what I need in life and they can be praying against it. I've never thought about that before.
Yeah, I love it.
So it happens.
It happens. You would be naive to think you go to church and they're all actually Christians, and there's
Right.
not a few devils in sheep clothing there.
Right.
Knowing, hey, how can I pray for you? And then they're going to, because they know how to attack you.
Right.
So you have to be on guard with who you go to with being vulnerable.
Mhm.
Just like Nehemiah, I think it was in chapter 1, he didn't go to a lot of people with his plans, because when you're vulnerable, you also let the enemy seep in. You go to the wrong person.
Full circle.
Mm-hmm.
This is all clicking.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
You go to the wrong person in something, it can completely break down your walls.
Yeah.
It could discourage you. It can bring chaos. It could bring confusion. I just think it's very foreshadowing to Nehemiah, because it even says, the trumpeter stayed with me to sound the alarm. In life right now, like Revelation, what's to come, we're all on guard right now.
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of waiting the end times.
Yeah.
We
I
all
really
need to-
good
yeah.
times.
We need to all put our shield of armor on of God.
Mm-hmm.
But also while we're at it and we're waiting to hear the alarms and we're waiting to hear the trumpets and we know when it has come, we have to be on guard.
Yeah.
It's so important.
I'm a little bit scared right now.
Are you?
Just like, I hope that it just, it makes me like kind of think, and I'm praying about like discernment when I'm like looking at the spiritual gifts and stuff, because it's so important to kind of sense people and be aware of their motives. That's why, and I know people will fight me on this and say that it's negative, but I really love the Enneagram for the true reason of just like, I feel like it helps me understand people better. When I know your motivation, I am better at giving people grace when I know where they're coming from. People argue that it's not great, and I understand, but for me, it's genuine and I try my best to get to know people. But just, I think it helps me with discernment. Like, I think that's kind of
100%.
where I was getting at. Just, why are you moving this way?
Right.
Is that I don't understand it, and that's not the way I move. But if I know you deeper, I can understand why to a degree, and I can give out a little bit more grace than I probably would have.
I think the Enneagram helps you justify people's actions if they're not good.
Yeah, I think so.
Because you're such a loving and graceful, like you give a lot of grace to people that don't deserve it.
Yeah.
It's almost justifying, well, you know, Dominique led in anger today because she's an 8 and that's just who she is. But in reality, it's like, no, it's still not justified.
Right. I think I have kind of lived in that realm of, well, they just are who they are because this is who they are. And no, because like God's refining us constantly. And I think there is truth to it for sure. Yeah, I need to be a better friend when you go to anger. I mean, I go to anger, like whatever, you know, but
We're both.
I get angry, whatever. But I think, but for different reasons, right? Like what's going to trigger you is not going to trigger me. And it's different motivations.
The beauty of the Bible in Nehemiah chapter 4, and we won. We are victorious. Us as Christians are victorious. I just think it's the message that even though we know we've won and we're victorious, we still need to make sure we're on guard and we have the righteousness of God on us. We have that armor on us, and that we are discerning on this earth, on this realm, what is for us and what is against us, what to look for, what not to look for. In that, it's like the most beautiful guideline of how we can discern. I think a lot of times, and I pray for discernment all the time, I'm like, dear God, please give me discernment on my friendships, on my relationships, on my future boyfriends, whatever it is. However, God also gives us key words in the Bible on how we can discern. Is this person causing you confusion? Are they causing you chaos? Are they not being enthusiastic to help you build your wall and your goals in life? There's a lot of key nuggets in Nehemiah as to if that person's maybe not enthusiastic to help you build your kingdom, maybe we need to kick discernment into high gear and put on that guard for this person, because it's just going to be discouraging. It's just going to end in a crumbled piece of brick.
Yeah. Nehemiah's going great.
I love
We've even made a
Nehemiah.
cross reference to chapter 1 of it.
It was chapter 1, right?
I don't know, but I mean, I know it was in there somewhere.
I love Nehemiah too. I just think he's such a good leader, truly, because in all of this, like you even said you were fearful. You're like, I'm getting a little scared now. And I think Nehemiah could have been scared and he could have been panicked and he could have freaked out and he could have got his counsel and said, this is not good. We're being attacked. I'm scared. Let's back down or let's stop building. Or he could have done nothing and he didn't.
Yeah.
It just goes to show what great leadership he embodied
Yeah.
in his actions, truly in his actions.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. I just think it's fun too to like sit across from you and watch you like get excited because yeah, like we said in the first episode when we were talking about what book to do next, we both were kind of like, Nehemiah, like,
Yeah.
you know, like who knows? But I don't know. I'm learning so much from you in this and like I can just see the Lord just using you so much to share what he has in this book. And I'm just so excited to sit next to you doing this.
Oh, I love that. And on that note,
I'll pray us out.
yay.
Dear God, thank you so much for this episode tonight, for getting Dom and I together again. So much in this to pray for, I think. But God, we just pray that you continue and remain to be the cement in our walls, that you just leave no cracks where the enemy can infiltrate us. God, and if there are cracks and you are allowing him to infiltrate us, that just in whatever way he is, that you can just build us and make us stronger in that we do not get discouraged, that we rejoice in the unfortunate so we can become stronger in the righteousness and glory of you. And God, we just pray, we just stay on guard, that you just equip us with all the weaponry that we need, mentally, spiritually, figuratively, all the things, just to constantly protect ourselves by your protection and then others. God, help us to grab our sisters and brothers in Christ that have sat down to take a rest and don't know if they can get back up. Give us the words to encourage them to keep moving forward, and let us cover them whenever they can't cover themselves. Let us cover ourselves whenever we need that too. But yeah, in your name, amen.
Amen.